Greetings and welcome back to another supporters stream. I gotta fix something on Jitsi here before I push everything over. Uncle Bonehead, you should be set to join in again. Let's see. Jump over there. Also, Uncle Bonehead, make sure you have the link directly right. I think I sent it correctly, but just double check. All right. I forgot to check if the other streams are active. They should be. I usually don't have that many problems with them. And pop out chat. Uh-oh. I have a oh, that's an ad. I was gonna say there was a notice on the bottom of Rumble. No, it was just an ad. Got rid of it.
Something is happening. All the ads you posted in the video I watched today, they said out of stock in them.
What? Oh, I checked all of those. I check if they're out of stock or not. Was that the media one?
In the ad.
Was that the movie one?
The multimedia one, I think.
Dude, I checked all of those. They shouldn't.
I think the first one and one in the middle or something.
Okay, there were 4 products on that. What was the first one? I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I can't do that right now. Oh, well. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about regular stories about normies becoming Linux aficionados. Of course, you don't have to be a computer geek or an expert. I mean, look at me. Believe it or not, I might be the least technical tech channel guy. Especially with how high my ranking is, because I wasn't a computer science major and I wasn't a computer tinkerer. I was just a web developer that got really pissed off when Windows was like, we're going to start perpetually collecting data and you can't turn it off. Like, no, you're not. Of course, it's getting worse. So I dropped a video in the Matrix server today from a couple days ago that another way of getting around the forced Windows login has been dealt with by the soft. And so I can't get, although I think that the way he still is recommending, I think is the way I still did on mine. So I just can't remember exactly which one I used, but the point is that Linux is not hard to switch. I did invite Fresh Vintage over on the show today, but he said they would have definitely jumped on, except they're off to a car show tomorrow morning. I guess there's a car show in North Carolina, I think he said he's going to.
Yeah, they have them there all the time.
Yeah, so if you're in North Carolina and there's a car show that interests you, Fresh Vintage will be there. Swing by and say hello to them.
Car show to get to a car show.
Yeah, there you go. Let's see. Oh, no, is it Indiana? Hold on. He told me where he's going. 100%. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Virginia. Oh, it's Virginia International Raceway for a huge show and event. Okay. So if there's going to the car show there in Virginia, check out Fresh Vintage. Because they are actually switching to Linux on some of the computers over there. Not everything, of course. I have to forgive them, but Jay loves that Apple. But they love it enough that on their channel somewhere, Jay drives like a 98 or something. Is it an Acura? It's some old car from the 90s, and they have an Apple CarPlay in there. I gotta respect it. But
yeah, man, gotta love it.
Yeah, but we did want to share just our regular stories today about switching to Linux. Hopefully I spelled everything right. Yes, it looks like it did. So we're not going to record the video. I'm going to jump in a little bit here, and then we'll get into our basic stories. I think what we're going to do, guys, I think I might go first today, and then we'll leave you guys up to do your stuff. Also, update on the Raspberry Pi. I think I found my distro. See, I did Armbian with Cinnamon. It was a little laggy. So I switched over to MX Linux, which was just absolutely amazing. But there's just something about XFCE I just didn't want to run it on my main system. So it's like, well, let's try Budgie. Budgie had a few issues, but I'm like, you know what? To fix the desktop issues on Budgie, I do install Nemo. Like, well, if I'm installing Nemo, well, let's just go ahead and install Cinnamon. Cinnamon running on MX Linux on the Raspberry Pi doesn't feel like a Raspberry Pi. It is absolutely fast. And it's 5.6 or something, 5.6, I think. I think it's 5.6.2 or something. Cinnamon version, so it's not the newest, but I have just ordered, just out this week, the M2 slots for the Raspberry Pi are out. I just ordered me one of those, and I bet that that's going to make that thing work really well. So stay tuned for that. I think we'll probably do one more video on the MX Linux, how it is, comparing the Cinnamon to the Armbian Cinnamon. And then I will probably certainly go with that. So once that NVMe chip gets in here, I'm going to install that. And that will be my new web design computer, which won't feel like a Raspberry Pi. I need to do some power testing on my two systems as well, though. So we'll see. Also, I do believe that our big giant solar event knocked out one of the towers back at my usual parking spot where I have a house I can park at freely. So I can't stream there right now. I like the download is still good, maxed out, but the upload's only getting like 3. So I had to come among the people in town. So I'm once again doing streams in shopping plazas. So
it's in limp mode.
Yeah. So although at 2 a.m. last night, we did ping off of that old tower. So presumably they're trying to get it up and running. So we'll see. But I think it knocked it out because I didn't have good internet there ever since that event occurred. So
let's the old tower.
I think what we'll do, let's get into the story, some of the stories now. I think so in between each of our stories, we'll stop and take a brief comment break. And we'll go in from there. So I'll kind of start first. How did I switch to Linux? Very simple. I was a web developer. I was happily using Adobe products and Windows products. And then I see what's going on there on Windows. And I'm like, that ain't happening. Now, a little bit before this, I had an old compact computer, which some of these compact computers had really crappy designs. They actually designed one of these about, 10, 15 years ago, where the hard drive was literally plugged into the hard computer shell case. So anytime you just slid the computer off the desk or any movement would ban that right into the hard drive. And that thing went through 2 hard drives in the first 6 months. So I'm like, can I run Windows on an external hard drive? First I was in this little town in Wyoming and you couldn't actually get internal hard drives there. So you had to order them in. But I could buy an external hard drive. So can I run Windows on an external hard drive? Well, that was back in the Windows 7 era. No, you couldn't run Windows 7 from an external hard drive. You can these days. So I start in my research. I find this weird thing called Ubuntu or something like that. And I was like, okay, you can run it on that. Let's install it. And I installed it and it worked just fine on that compact and allowed me to continue to use that laptop. That's when I was doing software sales for an academic startup company out of Austin. And in that, so that computer was running my Salesforce instance and all of the notes I was doing. So I had one computer actually doing the presentation, and I did a second computer for my sales notes, Salesforce and notes and things like that. Whoa, sorry about that. I hit the microphone. So with that, what I ended up doing is I installed that, and it worked great. So that's fine. So I did get Windows 7 installed back on that eventually, but I still used that Ubuntu for a while. Then I threw it into a drawer, forgot about it, when the company was bought out and they laid us all off. So, oh well. So then what ended up happening is when this Windows news came out about Windows 10, I remember that little drive. Let's go on a hunt for that little drive. I think it was Ubuntu 11, if I remember. And so I ended up rediscovering Ubuntu. Of course, couldn't find the drive initially, but I went back on the internet, and by then 16 was out. It was actually 16. It was actually a beta. And so I download that and I run that because at that time my office had a Windows 8 computer, which was like my all-around media PC. I had my main work computer, which was Windows 7, and I had a Mac over there as well, which I used for compatibility testing. And some of my clients, I just did the Mac just to keep up to date on how to work a Mac. So I was doing that, and then I switched that middle media PC to Ubuntu. So now I'm running Windows, Linux, and Mac simultaneously across my whole office. So I'm doing different works and different things on all these. I'm realizing, man, this is actually working really good, and this is an external hard drive. So the only thing I didn't like about it is it didn't jive with my workflow, and that I like the panel at the bottom. That's why I like Cinnamon so much. You get the panel at the bottom. Everything is set up. It's easy to use. It's like the Windows-like format. Trust me, I tried all the different formats from Mac to GNOME to Elementary to Ubuntu with Unity, all these different things. I just keep coming back to that traditional layout, which has XFCE, Mate, and Cinnamon. Cinnamon being the most modern of all those, so that's why I tend to like that one the most. So that was my only concern. So I start hunting around. I first find plugins to give you a clunky panel on the bottom of Ubuntu, which it was okay. But then I discover Linux Mint. Hallelujah. Clouds opened up and amazing Linux distributions just came down from the sky. It possessed my computer and I installed Linux Mint, and that became my work computer when I wasn't in my office. Because my Windows 7 computer was getting old, the battery didn't have good capacity. So I migrated things over and I was now working half on Linux and half on Windows, depending on where I was working from. And then eventually, I actually kept running that Windows 7 computer for my main work until I got the Raspberry Pi, which I use to this day, which runs Manjaro. So that's really my switch to Linux happened over a number of years as we launched the channel, as we learned about different software, as we learned about the different tools and the different things that we could do. And so that is how I switched to Linux. It was a slow process because I'm usually slow in everything I do. I don't move quickly on a lot of things outside of emergencies. So that really is my journey and how I end up switching over to Linux. Anybody have any comments on my thoughts or my story before we move on here?
Sounds kind of similar to mine.
I was just thinking that maybe the Mint discovery coming from the cloud is the seed that turned you off of cloud computing altogether.
Yeah, pretty much. I just didn't want any of that kind of stuff out there, you know. It's okay if you can turn it off. It's okay if it's optional. I just didn't want it anywhere else. Dan, you were saying something too?
No, I just said it sounded kind of similar to what I went through.
Nice. Ivan, thoughts?
Oh, it's like through work. I had a similar experience. So,
yeah.
There you go.
All right, I want to scan through a couple comments, and then we'll jump onto one of your stories next. Kitty been using Linux Mint since the end of 2023. Maybe it's time to get Arch. Honestly, if Linux Mint's working for you, I would stay on Linux Mint. Arch rolls a lot more, and you have a greater capacity to break things. So, like, one of the packages I'm holding right now in Arch is the dreaded K-word, Kodi. Kodi, at least when I updated about, I don't know, a few weeks ago, the Kodi package was broken, and that's an application I use like every day. So I didn't want to mess with that. So just be aware that things roll a little bit quicker, so you have a lot more stability on Mint. So unless there's a reason you want to jump off of Mint, I'd just stay on Mint, at least for a while. I've been using on my laptop, so Spornix says I've been using on my laptop. I think Arch is a little more manual for me. So, yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, I have Endeavor OS, but you still do a lot of things. I did have Pomok for a while, but I never really used it anyway. It was clunky, so I got rid of it. I got rid of everything from the AUR. I abolished the AUR from the computer, and then, I just got into the terminal anyway. It's curious. You don't have to do things in the terminal in Linux, but I tend to do things in the terminal more often than not because
that
it's
reminds
just
me.
so convenient.
Speaking of laptops, I mentioned a couple of times that I've installed Linux on a new laptop for my brother, and part of this was to ensure that all drivers were installed because he doesn't care what type of driver it is. So I launched the drivers checking thing that is in Mint, and it said point blank that there was no need for any proprietary drivers on this system.
Yep, there you go. Then that's usually how it is. Let's get like Realtek or something crammed into there. War Thunder says he's been using Linux off and on since 2015. Only switched full time in 2020. Proud to say I've had Mint installed. That is approaching one entire year with no installs or major issues. There you go. Cinnamon installed on used latitude 7490. What's the difference between Cinnamon and LMDE? Okay, so it's not Cinnamon and LMDE. It's the regular Linux Mint, which is based on Ubuntu, and LMDE, which is based on Debian. So if you go into your software sources, you'll see two different places where software is there. You'll see one for Linux Mint, and you'll see one for either Debian or Ubuntu, depending on which one you're on. So what happens is the core system pulls from, whether it's the Ubuntu version or the Debian version, it pulls all those, and then the Mint repository comes in and takes priority. So if there's packages in both of them, whatever's in the Linux Mint repository will take preference over it. But it's the Linux Mint software is the same on both, but the core making up the operating system changes. So the regular one's based on Ubuntu, LMDE is based on Debian. Of course, the regular Ubuntu has Cinnamon, XFCE, and Mate, whereas LMDE only has a Cinnamon edition. You can install other desktop environments on each of those as well. They just don't necessarily have as polished of a look or a feel. But it's very possible to do. I mean, I just did that with the Raspberry Pi. It's Cinnamon's probably not the main one they want to run on it, but it seems to be running just fine for me. It's Mint, but instead of Ubuntu, swap with Debian. That is correct. Yep. All right. So glad somebody else got that answer before I got there, but hopefully I add something to the conversation. Let's see. I'll be glad when the new motherboard for my main system comes in the mail. Flew too close to the sun. Uh-oh. Yeah. All right. There's a song by Alan Parsons Project, Too Close to the Sun.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Oh, that's a great song. Actually, I did a report on that song in mythology in college.
Boomer music is always intriguing.
I love me some boomer music. Back in my day, we knew how to sing.
Yeah. We also knew how to play the instruments, too.
This is true. It wasn't all done with, like, patchworks of things, just patchworks.
Speaking of singing and playing, the Eurovision Song Contest happened last weekend, a week ago. And I didn't know this until I started reading about this, because there was a whole debate and noise about Israel being allowed to participate. Mm-hmm. And the broadcasting union said point blank that they have a right to participate because they are a paying member of the union, of the broadcasting union. So screw you, basically. And part of reading this is was I came across the rules, because I looked up the rules for participating. And I didn't know that for the entire lifetime of the Eurovision Song Contest, no one has ever actually played their instruments live on the stage. They are not allowed to. But they have the option to, for about 40 or 50 years, it was mandatory. Now Oh, that's what happened.
Pretty much. All right. Let's see. Dark Wolf says, I want to install Raspberry Pi OS on the external hard drive. Somebody asked which Raspberry Pi OS to install. I just don't know where it is because my internet went wonky and I had to go and address it. So there's a ton of different distros. I just do an internet search for Raspberry Pi operating system. So Armbian, MX Linux has a Raspberry Pi version. Of course, the best one is the Raspberry Pi OS if you want just like the full functionality. Ubuntu, I hear, runs great on it, the new version of Ubuntu. And then there's just tons of other options. And then you have specialty like Open Source Media Center and LibreAlec. You have things like gaming emulators and things like that. So there's a number of different options that we have. So that's that. All right, let's jump in. Who wants to give your story next?
I guess I'll get mine out of the way.
All right, Dan, you got the floor.
Okay. a long time ago, back about 2005 or something like that, I discovered this thing called OpenSUSE, and at that time it was run by Novell. And I had set up a machine to tinker with it and look at it and stuff like that, and it was fun. It had stuff in it, but it just didn't. At the time, I had a lot of Windows software I was invested in, and it just didn't at the time have equal software and capabilities that the Windows stuff had. However, I did get a hold of a package is from Apache for server use, and I went and I built a second computer out of spare parts and actually made an Apache server. And I used a company called No IP to obtain a domain to where I could actually run the server on the internet. And that was when the internet was like young and the Wild West and everything else, you know. And I thought that was really intriguing, that I could access work files and stuff like that, and manuals and stuff like that that I had saved right from the server in my basement. Well, anyways, that kind of got to be a little bit hard to keep up with, and a little extra work. And when it broke, it broke, and it was hard to fix. And it just faded away. Well, then, anyways, moving on into this century, um, I want to say about 2050, right around Ubuntu 14.0 something that had the Unity desktop.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take a look at that, and I put it on a hard drive and hooked it up to my computer and played with it and everything like that. And I wasn't really impressed. It didn't grab me there either, you know. And yet I was still having issues with having too much Windows software, not finding equal compatibility type softwares. So I put that away until about 2017, 18, around the time when Windows 10 was just starting to get out and get some traction, and it was fresh and new. So I had a Windows 7 machine, and I was going to upgrade it to Windows 10, and I had purchased another hard drive to do this on in case I had to do an immediate flop back. And when I went to install at that time Windows 10, it immediately took you to their end user agreement.
Yep.
Where you couldn't go no farther unless you accepted it. So I started reading it, and it started telling me it was going to collect telemetry and all kinds of stuff about your computer information, what you use it for, your location, yada yada yada. And I'm like, I'm not having none of this. It's like, you know, throwing cow pies at the fan. I'm not. That broke the camel's back when I started reading this stuff about the telemetry and the things and the information that they wanted to collect out of your computer.
Yep.
So I went back to this Linux thing, and at this time, it had matured enough where if I couldn't use my Windows software I paid for, which most of it was getting kind of old and clunky anyways, and there was some new Linux stuff that came out to actually replace it. So at that point in time, I decided I did a lot of distro hopping with Big Daddy and that team when they were really a hot YouTube channel that got 200 or 300 viewers every Saturday night. And I went through my share of distro hopping and trying them all out, and I wound up on Linux Mint for about a year. And I started learning about virtual machines, and that's some of them things were things that I really was geared for, because I wanted a virtual machine of Windows so I could wrap up the last few programs of Windows I had. If I had to use that stuff, I could open it up and do my thing. Like now, Microsoft for some reason destroys everything great they make. And they
We
make
had
this
money
great
back in the day.
the Microsoft Zune, it turned into something that I think is a better product than the Apple iPod, even though iPods around here too, because the screen's bigger and it's easier to use. But they had made this great money program called Microsoft Money. It was really easy to use. A beginner type person could figure it out with ease. And then they sunsetted it and gave it away for free to everybody. So, to this date, I have a sunsetted package of Microsoft Money running on a Windows 7 virtual machine that does not connect to the internet. And the great thing is I can take that virtual machine and I can move it to a laptop or, any other place I want it to. So I have a backup of my banking system.
Nice.
So, virtual machines, I got into with VirtualBox, and I learned a lot of tricks on how to do things with VirtualBox, and I got into some of the forums with them and stuff like that. And they let me in on some extra tricks because VirtualBox is like an industry standard. They run this thing on servers for all kinds of things.
I think VMware is probably more popular, but I don't know. We might see a resurgence of VirtualBox with the VMware going subscription.
Yeah. But
it's funny. It's big news. VMware is now free for personal use. It was free a long time ago, forever.
There was some music software because I use my Windows machine to actually convert my music to MP3s and tag them and all that other stuff. And the two pieces of software that I used a lot was MP3 tag and MP3 gain. Okay. There are Linux equivalents like there's Puddle Tag, there's Kid 3, I believe. They just don't. They're not as complete as MP3 Tag is. MP3 Tag actually gives you a place to go get your album art and stuff like that, where the others do not. However, MP3 gain too. It's also there's a Q MP3 gain and there's a WX MP3 gain for Linux, but it kind of don't feel like the Windows one. It's lacking features. You can still do it. MP3 gain also not only comes as a GUI for Linux, it also comes as a command line tool as well. But both of these programs run perfectly fine on Play with Linux with the Wine underlay. And so does now all my other old hardware software that I got that I bought 20 years ago. It runs on Play on Linux just fine. But I was able to actually overcome all these needs and things that connected me really to Windows, But now Linux can be the main dog and Windows can go bite the big one. I find it useful that you do have to have some sort of Windows. In some cases, you might get trapped where you need to update firmware for something. Well, if you have a Windows VirtualBox, Windows 10 VirtualBox, you can connect your USB through that, and you can directly connect it to a device that needs new firmware update. That's what I find I need Windows the most for is firmware transfers. And fixing a few of these stupid things, I have to at least access Windows to get to iTunes once to initialize the device. Once it's initialized, then you can use the Rockbox and install that, and then you can just copy your music files from Linux right to the player. It's a shame that they don't have a Rockbox, though, for the Microsoft Zune.
Yeah. So I was looking at a couple things because I use Kid 3 for tagging. It looks like you might be able to import data. I don't use it to tag music. I use it more for organization and podcast stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's actually plugins now for Disco import, FeedDB import, MusicBrainz import. So you might examine that to see if those are there and they work, because you might be in a better position. That might be something you might want to play around with, and let me know for sure.
There is also an application called Picard, I believe, which is dedicated to this type of tagging.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that the MP3 tag is the top dog. It does everything. It even gets you your album art from Discogs or Amazon or wherever you choose to point it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, those are all good experiences as well.
So-
Again, it's just that slowly, let's test, let's probe, and then hey, we've had enough.
And people, look at me weird for gaming on Linux. The funny thing is, I never gamed before really for years. I kind of grew out of it with a PlayStation 2. I had that for a while, and I got sick and tired of spending $20 to $30 for each game to put in it, to find out, I get tired of it and want to move on. So I quit sinking money in that and just quit right there. But then some of the Linux people, when Spatry still was running his channel and stuff like that, we would have a Saturday night game night where we would play a Linux ported game like Battle of Westnoff or Zero AD or something like that, or Tux Carts. And we would play a couple hours for Saturday nights until he had life get in the way, and he kind of is off doing other stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like video production. I know you can do video production on Windows. I just wouldn't know where to start.
Right. Yeah, after a while, I find Windows right now very clunky to use and very hard to control because
and
I
some
don't
of
know
that's
it like I
just
used
because
to.
we're so used to Linux, but
Well, it's because you're not using it anymore, and it keeps changing and mutating too, just like Linux does. So, what do you want to mutate with?
yeah. Anyone using Arctics here? I think I've looked at it before.
What is Arctic Space? Is it Arch based?
I think
That
so.
seems.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I
Yes.
seriously thought about running Arco again. A guy on Linux cast.
Is Arco still a project, or I thought Arco folded into Endeavor, didn't it, or something?
Arco seems to be running because there was a guy on. Let me look.
Was it?
Yeah, there was a guy on Linux cast that was talking about. Maybe I was watching like a super old video or something and didn't realize.
Yeah, I thought Arco folded into something else, but I could be wrong because I haven't really followed it that much.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I really loved Arco, but Arco.
Arctic says Arch without System D. So yes, I have looked at that.
Nice.
Ivan, are there more than 5 comments on Odyssey? Do I need to reset Odyssey, or is that all there is?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Last one I have is
No,
Jim.
the last one in there is mine saying the other services are back up. That's it.
Oh, I don't even have that one.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does look like it's still the website's still up. I mean, it's still an
Hey,
abomination.
there we go. I have comments now. Look at that.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of comments over there, but
No.
Well,
There's 14 people watching.
There's not a lot of activity going over there, and Rumble has 18. YouTube though is up to 65. So YouTube's going strong. We've had a resurgence in YouTube. That's kind of good. I know some people will be mad about that, but screw them.
It also seems like Strawberry is active on the Rumble chat.
Yes, I see that.
Biden's economy is just.
Well, we're not talking economy though.
And I forget we're streaming. We're live right now, so we can't talk about that.
Okay, so I don't have any specific objections other than the fact I want to stay on topic of switching to Linux.
I know. Let's move forward.
To see
what I wanted to finish out my segment was after the gaming with them guys and having so much fun. This is the time about when Steam started to really gain traction in the Linux community, and everybody got excited. And the excitement for running Windows games on Linux was brewing. And I started actually buying some of the Windows games and learning how to set them up on Linux and Steam.
Yeah.
And and now I'm pretty content with gaming on Linux, So maybe there's a few titles like from E&A or something like that got anti-cheats or something like that that won't work on Linux, but I really don't care about those.
Uncle Bonehead says that Arco is still a big project, so it must have been another Linux I was thinking of that folded into
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely. I'm looking at it now. Everything is there, and he's added a lot
Yeah.
of screenshots and stuff.
Nice.
But I don't like how they need to work on their organization. And he was supposed to have changed the ISOs and the layout, but
yeah, I
this is
think
confusing.
if I remember with Arco, if I'm remembering correctly, they were kind of designed to kind of do a guided teaching you through. So if you want to just I just want a Linux, they have a build for that, but they also have builds to get in there and start learning some things. So it's a neat project in that respect, that there's some really cool elements to it where you can learn Linux better.
It's very educational based, which I love that, but if you're trying to reach a larger market, having all of these Arco Linux, Arco D, Arco V, and Arco ISO is just going to absolutely confuse the normie beyond belief.
Yeah, and it's Arch based anyway, and normie shouldn't be over on Arco anyway.
If you pick the right one, it's a good way to get an Arch system up and running.
Yeah. Ivan, are you set to talk your Linux journey?
Yeah. It was. Let's see. I'll kind of start off with back in my day.
My day, with the Uncle Bonehead said. Dan starts back in my day. We only had Unix.
Yeah, that's where I got the idea from.
Okay. Anyway,
back at my old work when I first started working there. It was very, very minimal. Very, very. Not even the scratch of the surface. It was a Solaris install on one of the servers, and it was command line driven with shell scripts on the screen, and that was it. I mean, we used DB access and then a couple of custom shell scripts and stuff like that, and that was how it was, for generating reports, things like that. And that's how it was for years. And then jump back to 10 years ago. I actually got in a situation in this complex I'm living at, different unit. And I made the jump being like, I've heard about, and I pronounced it as Ubuntu because that's what I first heard years prior. So that stuck with me to this day. And I'm like, I'm kind of curious about it. I think I might want to play with it, stuff like that. But I'm just gonna go full bore, cut the Windows cord as it was, you could call it that, and search it out. And I found Linux Mint right off the bat, and I loaded it up, and it was fantastic. I wasn't playing my game anymore because I needed Windows for that originally. It had been a couple of years. Started playing that, or playing around with it, and loved Linux Mint, and it was the Ubuntu version, and because I just started using the Debian edition in the past couple of years, and it was doing, I liked it. I didn't need it for anything else. It was my personal productivity machine. That's how it's been. That's how it still is, and I've got it on this machine here, and then I put it on a couple of laptops for a couple of relatives, and they didn't complain about it, although one kind of did because can't play my games. I was like, oh boy, here we go. And
here, have a Steam Deck.
I know exactly. Yeah, he's got a Steam Deck now. he's got a setup that's, oh my word, and so it worked out really well. And, I did distro hop a couple of times, like to Zorin. I peaked at elementary, and that was back in like 14, maybe 15. And another one was, I did Ubuntu for like, a minute. And but every single time I always ended up coming back to Mint. And I just said, hey, this is good. I'm happy with it. It does what I want. I communicate with it just fine, and that's just where I'm at. But as far as the Windows side of it goes, it's like, I still kind of sort of have to support it a little bit for relatives, so that's what I do there. And I do have a separate box altogether that I do that because I started playing that one game again like 3.5 years ago. And that's where I do all of my video editing on. I'm like, I got to do more than just play a game on it. So I'm like, I'll do my video editing on that machine. So that's like the machine for that. So I'll keep it separate from Linux. Productivity, fun. There you go.
Yep.
So fun and hobbies separate from my productivity. That's where I really want the safety, security, the good part of it. And it's been a blast the whole time. I haven't had any complaints whatsoever with Mint. And so I just focus on that, really.
And they're always doing
a Raspberry Pi version. That'd be awesome.
Mint's always mixing it up a little bit with every release. They'll do a little something different, just a little something to keep you interested. I think it's really cool too. Yeah, what they did with the Fastly repositories was super helpful, very practical.
Yeah, and I've dove into Raspberry Pi stuff and such like that because I did I did a server project using the Pis for Minecraft, and I've got that all archived because that went stale, and the guy just stopped doing it. Plus, Microsoft bought him out, and I'm like, all right, you can buy them out, then I'm all done. So I've got 4 right up here, and I'm using 2 actively as file servers. Very simple file servers.
4 Pis?
It's not very fast or anything, but it does the job. And I'm like, hey, it's useful, especially when I need to send files back and forth between my Linux box and my Windows box. I use that because I got them both mapped into it.
Sweet.
And and I just use Raspberry OS, and it's fine. And I'm very happy with my experience. No complaints.
Nice, very good. We have had there's a little bit more commentary on Raspberry Pis in the comments. So as far as other distros, the one I'm running, so I've run a Raspberry Pi running Manjaro for 4 years consecutively as a web design computer.
Hey, so good.
Now, at that time, I went with Manjaro because at that time of all of the Raspberry Pi builds I found, other than Raspberry Pi OS, it was the most supported. Raspberry Pi OS was more supported in a way. However, it just doesn't have the flash and the sway. You know, it's a little ugly to look at. It looks like an old 90s thing. You know, it works. It's highly functional. But Manjaro is just beautiful in its implementation. And I've only had a few weird snafus with it. There was one time when a change in the Pi firmware messed up the mouse. And we had to fix that. And then there was a period of time for about a year where it would randomly just freeze. But it only did it like maybe once a month or so. But apparently a few other people were having that issues as well. And after recent updates, they don't work. Now I have issues where the mouse pointer on some GTK applications like Evolution, the mouse pointer doesn't align perfectly, which is highly annoying. But I know it's there. And those all just kind of were introduced as time went by, maybe as QA fell in Plasma. Of course, that's in Plasma. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. So when I got the Pi 5, which I will be putting in production after I get a few more components for it, I've been experimenting. So I first tried Armbian, which it works fine, but it still feels like it has a little bit of the lag that the Raspberry Pi 4 has. I threw MX Linux on it, and it doesn't feel like a Raspberry Pi. It is like... And I even threw Cinnamon on top of that. It's just like, it's really fast. Now, I did find it is dependent on the theme. I was looking for a beautiful little tricked out theme. I threw it on there. You can look at the tricked out theme on the Matrix server. But that was, it was causing a lot of lag, something in the theme. And it wasn't transparency because the theme didn't have transparency enabled. But something in that theme was really laggy. I went back to Arc Dark. Flawless. It's just beautiful.
I like the Adapta and the Adapta Nocto or whatever. I like those, and I like the Arc ones. They're really pretty.
Yeah, the Arc is. I'm not a huge fan of the material flat design, but they're highly functional. They look really good, and I'm using that with the Papyrus icon theme. And frankly, the system looks good and unified, and that's all I care about.
Variety is the spice of life.
I made changes to the themes for Evolution and Bluefish. Bluefish Editor does not work well on dark themes, so I forced that to use a Arc Light. And then Evolution works fine on the dark, but I prefer my email client to be light themed if possible. So I just forced that one on Arc Light as well.
Try Graybird.
Those are good. What's that?
It's good. Graybird or Bluebird.
Graybird looks too old. It looks like a 90s computer.
It does, but
I hate
good
it.
to me.
I hate it. I think it's ugly as hell.
Bluebird.
Yeah, I think it's ugly as hell. Personal preferences. But there's a lot of cool things. If you are looking for a good Pi build, though, I got to say, if you want to run anything close to Arch, Manjaro's got Raspberry Pis figured out, I think, best of anybody. Now, the 5, and after 4 years, a lot of other distros are coming on board. Pop! OS has a Raspberry Pi build. I'm seeing a lot of good things about the Ubuntu build, if you like Ubuntu. I'm seeing a lot of cool things about that one. So there's a lot of options for Pi, whether you want to run a full operating system or something else. And I've had no problems, and I imagine I just ordered the parts to add a M2 SSD. And once that gets added, I think it's going to be infinitely faster. So I should get those parts in next week or so. Anyway, Salbu, you want to give us your journey through Linux?
Yeah, sure. So my journey started in the 1990s, so at least 27 years ago.
Back in your day, we only did have Unix.
Yeah, and tape drives.
Yeah. So
punch cards.
My journey started with so I had Windows 90. My first computer was MS-DOS 5.0 286 that I got in 94.
He's old.
Yeah, and it came without Windows, so the command line was all you had to do. But I had a friend who taught me how to use it. It was easy, and it was intuitive once you figured out that every command had a /help switch, which gave you an idea of what you can do, and there was many. Yeah, so that's how I started, and then I got to Windows 95 eventually. And I started to certain magazine subscription for a Norwegian computer magazine, which talked all about Windows and what you could do and upcoming programs and so on. And one of the things that they wrote about every now and again was each time that Microsoft came with something new. Was that Windows in the 90s was not it was not a real 32-bit system. So I learned the difference between 16-bit and 32-bit, and that the underlying MS-DOS was 16-bit. So I had gained a bit of knowledge about what the difference were, and then so I eventually got Windows 98, and so I lived next to a gas station which had a lot of these magazines, computer-related magazines, some in Norwegian, some English magazines. And I remember one particular. It was a Norwegian magazine, and the whole front cover. It was in Norwegian, but it loosely translated said. A real 32-bit free operating system, and I have already learned a couple of years earlier that Windows was not a true 32-bit. So here was an actual 32-bit operating system, and it was free. This I just had to try, and the CD that accompanied this magazine for that week. Or for that month was SUSE 5.2. OpenSUSE didn't exist at this point, and I installed it, and I even managed to get on the internet with it. But there was something wrong that I didn't understand, because very often the system would freeze, and I would have to push the reset button, and this annoyed me to no end. And after 2 days, I thought, screw this, and I reinstalled Windows 98. And then I talked, I went to my church on my meeting the following Sunday, I believe it was. and I mentioned to him that I've been trying this Linux thing. And then he told me that if I had just pressed this and that, I could have just killed whatever froze my system. But then it was too late. And then the next week, when he came to church, he gave me a book. This one,
Nice.
The Complete Idiot's Guide to Linux. And it comes with Open Caldera 1.3. Which I installed, and it worked. It had a bug, and it even says in the manual, this small manual, it said that there was an error which prevented it from launching the graphical login, but you can just start it from the terminal. And then, so I used that for a few weeks and for testing. And then the 2 years after this, there was a new operating system coming out in all the computer-related magazines, which was Corel 1.2, which also ended up being the last Linux that they did, because they had just been acquired by a company owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft allegedly told them promptly to stop this Linux thing. The rumors are very strong that this is what happened. But anyway, I have since learned that this was a Debian-based system. I didn't know this at the time, but it was configured in and themed in a way that it was Windows lookalike. So all the menus was as if it was a Windows environment. And I used this, so I dual booted this and Windows 98 for 9 months, I think it was, and I was quite happy. And I did, I even learned how to take backups of files and so on. And then the time comes, because also on the system, I had the Norton Utilities in Windows. And one function that it had was that if there was something wrong with the bootloader, it would fix it automatically on boot up. And after 9 months, it discovered that there was something wrong with the bootloader, so it fixed it. It didn't give a prompt if it should fix it. Also. And that was the last time I saw of Corel 1.2. And at that time, I never managed to figure out how to get back into it. And so I was without Linux for a little while until I got a new computer, which I installed. So now I have 2 computers, one with dedicated to Windows and one dedicated to Linux. And the thing that I installed was Red Hat 7.2, which I used which ran for almost 10 years on this particular system. And it ended up serving as my gateway when I learned how to configure a firewall on it, because I knew already this was in 2001 or 2002 when and in 2002 I installed Red Hat, and I already learned that if you don't know what you're doing, don't put a Linux system on the internet, because they could log in and hack you, and then and I didn't know what I was doing. Security-wise,
yeah.
Until I found out IP chains script. This was before IP tables was widely available, and it was called DEFCON 4. So I used that, and I also learned that if you, because I didn't know, so I've been using Linux for maybe 3 years at this point, on and off, and I still didn't know that there was such a thing as a package manager. Because the manuals that I had either didn't have it or I didn't read it thoroughly enough. So when I needed to install something, what I would do was I would fetch the tarball from the developer website and unpack it, and then run the configure and make routine And
don't
one of
think
the
that
things that I
means
needed to
weird.
install was dependent on upgrading the Qt version. So I went to the Qt website and downloaded the version that it said it needed and compiled that. And I remember it took 12 hours to compile. And I got to install it. And so I mentioned on IRC that I was hanging out in that I had done this. And then one of them asked why didn't you install the RPM file? And my reaction was,
What's
they have
that?
an RPM file. Because I learned what an RPM file was, but I didn't notice that they actually had an RPM install option, which would have saved me a considerable amount of time.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
But you got it done.
yeah.
And
So I used this for a few years, and then I got a third computer in house, and this was in 2004, 5 maybe. It was at the time when Debian 3.0 came out, and this was at the time when the default Debian installer was the text-based one, which asked about 200 questions, I think it is. And this was the default installer at the time. And I got to 20 questions about when I gave up, and I said, screw this, you have to. My feeling was that the installer had to figure out most of these questions by itself, because the Windows did, and the other Linux versions that have been distros that I'm testing also did this. And then I remember that I had a new magazine that was lying around for maybe 3 months, which came with Mandrake 9.0. So I installed that, and that is why I'm today still is on a Mandrake-based distro. Mandrake later changed the name to Mandriva as part of the merged with our Brazilian distribution called Connectiva. And Mandrake was also involved in a lawsuit by the publishing house that owned the rights to the cartoon character Mandrake, the magician, which was resolved by them changing the name. And it was hushed up, I think, later on. I don't think any money was exchanged. They got they got what they wanted for them to stop using the name. At the same time as this happened, there was a talk, and I was invited by the friend who gave me this book. Terje Bråten is his name. He lives in London now and has a family and everything. He invited me to the university in Trondheim. I have later learned that they used the biggest auditorium in the entire university and the third biggest city in Norway for hosting this event. When Richard Stallman on the 17th of February 2005, and he talked about, and his talk was what is free software. That was the brunt of his talk. And this talk is the reason that I started to realize the importance of having access to the source code and having legal access to it, like the license on the code matters. And it is why I still have all this GNU gear, and why I prefer the term free software. And I actually is careful to avoid the term open source, because those two are not the same.
Yep.
Which we have touched on several occasions. So that happened, and I gained some knowledge and a few new friends. And in 2008, so the newest Windows that I had was Windows 2000 when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
I refused to touch XP when it came, because of the there was much writing in the computer magazines and papers about the need to activate. And my firm belief is that the manufacturing of a software has no business knowing who I am after I have got access to their legal access to their software. They have no business knowing who I am if I use the software, how many times I use it, or yeah. So I stayed with Windows 2000, and on the 28th of January in 2008, the hard drive running Windows crashed. The drive actually died.
Oh no.
Yeah, but it was only hosting the operating system, because I had another drive which was 3 times as large, which I had all my computer file, game files, and all my data files and so on. So I didn't lose anything. And my backup, so I used this software called Drive Image 5.0 at the time to run backups. But all the four, so I had 2 bootable CD-ROMs and 2 bootable floppy drives. None of them worked, and I knew that if I had wanted to reinstall Windows, this would have taken about 2 hours, and then installing all the other software that I used was another maybe 4 hours, and then configuring all that was 3 days work. I have done it. I knew it. So no, I didn't want to do that.
That was it.
That was the last straw. And at that point, I had been using Linux daily for 7 years, and I knew it was time to lose the last installation.
Yep.
And 2 years later, I became involved with the Mandriva when I discovered that my favorite computer game ever is the 1994 release of XCOM. It's now known as XCOM. It was UFO, Enemy Unknown, and it's still my favorite game. And then in 2010, I discovered that someone had made a clone of this, which is called UFO Alien Invasion, or UFO AI is the package name. So I downloaded and tried it, and it worked, and it was glorious. I loved it. For the first time in many years, I could actually play all the DOS, a version of this game. And then I discovered that there was a package in my distribution for Mandriva.
We need to get wrapping up pretty soon. Like,
Yeah.
I can't be in the parking lot until like 10 tonight. So,
Yeah, so that's how I then so I had already befriended a couple of the developers of Mandriva at the time, and the 2 of them teach me how to do packaging properly, because I wanted this game to be updated, and that's why I'm still doing packaging to this day in Mageia.
Yeah.
So I had a long journey of switching, and because in the beginning, my problem was that I couldn't do the things I wanted on Linux because the software didn't exist.
yep.
And in the later years, in the last 2 years, so from 2006 to 2008,
I'm better.
I had problems doing things in Windows because the software that I needed didn't exist for Windows.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that when people say that it's hard to switch to Linux, it was for a period of time. And many of those people that say that might still be going back to, 10 years ago when they first looked at it. It was so abysmally terrible 10 years ago. I think and this is why I push back against Wayland and all these, young kids that think I'm like, I just don't know what I'm talking about. No, I actually do. The problem is Linux really only got good in the last few years as far as being able to do anything and everything. And the Wayland standard is seeking, like, it will naturally cause to destroy that. Yeah. And that's why we can't jump to it too quick. Yes, we need to work on it. Yes, it needs to be an option. But we can't abolish X and just push Wayland, because it's just not the way to go. You're going to have regression, which is going to make Linux harder for people, and we need to make it easier for people.
Wayland put me in hell for a weekend this past weekend. I don't want to touch Wayland. I want X11 pure. Forget it.
Yeah, I mean, you need to understand the limitations of the software and stuff like that, you know.
There are so many things I needed for work.
Yeah.
It's just not working now.
Mark, can you do a 5-minute
I'm gonna do
exploration of Linux?
I'm gonna do a 90-second, and I'm gonna under promise and over deliver. So I'm gonna cut this. Okay, my first Linux distro was Linspire Linux.
Okay.
No one knows what that is or even cares. It was almost 20 years ago or more. What brought me to Linux is initially in the last 5 to 10, 15 years is my neighbor Eddie. I had been using Windows. I had left Linux because I had issues getting. I was inspired by the click to run technology in Linux that was new, and I researched and found online about it. Moving past Linspire, my neighbor Eddie recommended Linux Mint to me.
9 seconds is up.
I tried it on my Acer Aspire, loved it, ran it. Everything worked. Since then, I've been using Linux mainly because of privacy. With Windows, Windows is doing things that it's hard to sleep at night running Windows. So yeah, Linux is superior. It just works now. It's only gotten better in the last, few years. Several people. When is the year of the Linux desktop? The year of the Linux desktop is when you start today and start to learn and adapt and change some of your software if you need to. And just try it. Just try it out because it's a beautiful thing. Open source and free and liberated software. It is a beautiful, beautiful world, and I am so grateful for this community to be a part of it. I love Linux. Absolutely adore it.
Yep. Yeah.
Done.
So there you go. All right, it was a little over 9 seconds, but it was definitely under the 5 minutes I gave you. So that's good.
Yeah.
I ran a stopwatch on you for a moment there too. Yeah.
I need to work on my ATX. Well, the RMS was a big influence. I will say he is absolutely right on a lot of stuff. But it wasn't practical in modern society with the way things are. And
it's weird to think about that. All this free software movement and later the open source movement all happened because the MIT artificial lab where Stallman worked, they wanted to get the source code of the printer driver for the new laser printer, and they refused access. That was the spark that started the whole thing. Printer
it all boils down to printers.
Mine was click to run. Linux had the capability to work like Windows when installing apps, and I didn't know what a package manager was. I didn't know what a tarball was. Yeah. I had learned about a tarball at that point too, and from there it was Mint, and I took off from there. Fedora, I ran Fedora for work for years. Recently, rock solid, honest to God. I just hate the 6-month release cycle. Wish it was longer. My favorite distros: MX Linux, Fedora, Mint. That's main ones. Yeah. That's all. That's plenty. Yeah. That's plenty to be said.
I do remember Linspire back in the day. It was there was a lot of journalists, tech journalists, writing about it at the time. So I remember it well.
Yeah. It was a big thing because Linux is, Linux never had the capability to just double click an app and install it. I tried to get that working.
If I remember correctly, wasn't Ubuntu, I'm remembering that correctly, Ubuntu was like a rebrand of Linspire or something, or Linspire turned into what became
LXDE.
What was that?
Yeah, Ubuntu used the LXDE environment. And
No. Ubuntu, which was like the Windows clone. I thought that was who was that out of? Not Linspire. It would have been somebody else. Still exists.
Maybe it was Windows. I think followed.
Well, Windows was still something slightly different. Which I was going to do a video on that, but after digging through a bunch of research articles and stuff, it was actually not as interesting as it sounded.
Yeah.
Like, we did a thing. It was called Windows. Somebody had a problem with it, but it still sold some things, but not nearly enough. Mostly it was shut down because it wasn't profitable. It wasn't because of lawsuits. So, if it was spicier than that, I don't know.
Yeah, and unlike maybe most of the participants in this live stream, I think I am maybe the only one who haven't been distro hopping of any kind. I have found a distribution that worked, and I have stuck with it until there was a fork in 2010 due to some events that happened. And I joined the fork 2 years later.
Well, I
was
didn't
the
hop a
magic for
lot
me.
in
It's
production. In
stable.
fact, I've never actually hopped in production for this channel. I've been
What's
on Linux
funny-
Mint the entire time.
What's so funny is on that same Acer laptop that I ran Mint, you know what I was running before that ran like a dream. Honest to God. God is my witness. Vista. I loved it. Mint was that much
I'm gonna boot
as
Mark
good
for the
as
stream now.
Vista and better. Mint was better. And I thought, I can't believe this just got better.
Now, like Vista was good if you had a computer that matched the hardware. The problem
Yeah.
with Vista,
I
the
made
real
sure
problem
mine
with
did.
Vista is
Drivers.
no, it was actually that when Vista came out, the average computer was still shipping with only half to 1 gig of RAM, and the minimum system requirements, just the minimum to run it, was 1 gig. And so Vista,
that
the
wasn't
problem
right.
we had with Vista is computers were not powerful enough to run it. So once you actually got a
thought it was
computer
crazy.
with a lot of RAM and a good processor, and you got into the 64-bit processors and a lot of RAM, and then of course you had the patch of the SP1, Vista became really good. The problem is when it first shipped out, it's so meme-worthy because it shipped out in computers that were not even running the minimum system requirement, which should have been a massive class action lawsuit in and of
That
itself.
is absolutely correct.
Because it's
And
like,
it was also
Fact
the
that they
first.
put out so asinine, and I was cussing up a storm because everybody hated Vista. I said, your computer is shit. Get a modern computer.
hi. Family friendly,
I'm
family
sorry.
friendly.
Repent.
Repent!
And Vista was also the first version of Windows that had a strong DRM built into it, which slowed down some computing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I skipped Vista because I seen all the other people installing it around me and having all these issues, and I just I milked 7 right to the end where they cut it off. And
Windows ME. We had one Windows ME in our lab.
I skipped that too.
Yeah, and
My
that
grandmother
one was
bought
so
me that
bad,
machine. I
nobody would use that crap. It was just like constantly crashing.
Windows Me was trash. Absolutely atrocious. The worst distro by far was Windows Millennium.
I remember
Windows 2000 was solid.
I remember when the Windows Vista was because Vista came before Windows 7. So about 6 months before Windows 7 was released or was scheduled to be released, Bill Gates was interviewed by one of the big US news agencies, and he was asked about that a lot of people thought that Windows Vista was the worst version they ever shipped. If you had any comments to this. And then he had a slight smile on his face, and he said, ask me that question in 6 months when we release the new version.
XP, this is going to get a lot of flack. XP was the most overrated Windows distro. Yes, it was good, but it wasn't nearly as good.
I think XP was
nearly as good as people would rave about it. Let's go back to the Windows XP days. No, you don't understand how unstable. You don't remember.
I think Windows XP was actually very stable.
I think Windows XP was a malware magnet.
It was a malware magnet. You wouldn't want to put it on the internet today. It lacked a lot of that because remember the Windows XP came out before everybody had perpetually connected internet connections.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't used to being on the internet all the time.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of my trouble come in. I would catch malware and it's like, how the freak did I catch malware? And those were the early days. I didn't know half of what I know now.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know 10% of what I've forgotten now from 5 years ago. I mean, I've forgotten more. I used to run these tools like, oh my God, they're terrible. Avast and AVG and
well, I mean, they were good for a while. A lot of the problem with some software is it gets bad over time and you don't know it.
Yeah.
So, like everyone was running CCleaner and AVG and things. thinking, oh, these were so good because they were so good. But then, they were sold as companies, and then they started adding a bunch of crap or selling a bunch of data and things. So we're actually going to be talking about this. It might be my Saturday video because we'll just a preview of coming attractions. We're going to be talking a little bit about Edward Snowden's recommended software. And the thing is that some of it's still valid. Some of the software is not still valid. But I want to talk about that, the importance, what he was trying to say, and how we can take what his message beyond the message was and apply it to looking at newer software. Because I think that that's a good philosophical point to think about, is the fact that software changes. So AVG was really good until it wasn't, and a lot of people kept using it through a period it wasn't good and didn't know it wasn't good. And CCleaner had the same issue.
It wasn't effective.
Yeah,
it got less and less effective, and then they started to add the pro version.
It wasn't the effectiveness. It was the fact that they were sold to an advertising company that used your data.
Yeah.
And you don't want an advertiser company having access to the core elements of your computer.
But then when everything crossed over from viruses to malware, and then it got really dark when ransomware hit, and the first ever ransomware, probably circa 2007, 2008, we just went from code red to code black to death, because now hackers are not just trying to prove a point or cause malice. They're killing people. They're literally, they may not be trying to do it directly, but their actions is affecting hospital equipment, and people are dying because of ransomware.
Yep.
And
all right. We're gonna wrap up the show here because we still need to do our after show hangout and work on the news, and we only have 45 or so minutes to do that before I need to leave. If you missed it, of course, I'm guessing it was the solar flare issues messed up the cell towers on the east end of town, and so my regular parking spot, which I used to have amazing internet. I get good down. I just don't get enough to stream, so I have to be out in shopping plazas again doing our streams.
You're not.
I need to get out of the shopping plaza, roughly 9ish or so I don't start drawing attention to that creepy white van.
I had some weirdness recently. Definitely, even the day after, I had some weirdness.
Yeah,
something wasn't right. Well, it worked its way out. I'm glad it didn't damage my computer, because I figured. My internet glitched.
Yeah, I didn't figure it would do that, but some more sensitive equipment and things, cell towers and things.
I found the last 3 nights was absolutely horrible to try and stream a TV show or a movie.
Yeah, there's weird stuff.
Weekend, I had some weird stuff.
Salbu, go ahead.
Yeah, so we are about to wrap up. One thing idea I got was that once this end, so there is a comment section under this video. One thing that the viewers could do was mention underneath what was the first Linux distribution that they used, and how did they discover Linux.
Yeah, that'd be great if you want to leave that in the comments down below. We're not going to edit out this video, so we're going to leave it listed just as it is. So no problem of your comments disappearing as I hide. Sometimes I'll hide this video and release an edited version. We're not going to do that today. But yeah, let us know in the comments down below how you first found Linux and what was the first one you used, and are you still on that, or if you've jumped out to something else. So,
and for those who are curious about the Stallman talk that I attended in 2005 on my YouTube channel, I have published this video a couple of weeks ago. So if you search for Richard Stallman Trondheim, it should show up very easily.
Yep.
Why am I not subscribed to you? I knew you had to have a channel or something.
Well, because he just started it a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Tech Anchorage, I should be subscribed.
All right, we're gonna stop streaming now. So thanks for hanging out, guys. Tomorrow, 8:00 Eastern, weekly news roundup. So we'll have a good show tomorrow, and then I should have a video. I should have a video up. I have everything all planned out and mostly scripted out. I just need to record it, which I'm planning on doing tomorrow. So with that, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Try Linux.